Hey guys, welcome back to some more AFK Arena. Today we're back over on our YouTube account and we're going to be breaking down the utility tier list for May. Now overall, when you look at all of the new heroes we got, we know there is already a dialect for another hero that is coming up. And they are saying it is going to be a ranger and it is going to be a mauler. So it is going to be, of course, changing. But as of today, we're going to break down the draconic tier list with all the heroes in here. So let's hop over, look at tier list maker and really break down these heroes. All right, guys, so here we are for the May tier list. Now, of course, there's going to be some updates. There's going to be a lot of heroes that have kind of moved a couple different positions. And also looking at this list, it is the utility list. So starting up at our SSS Heroes, which are the best of the best. When you look at these heroes, when you look at utility, majority of game modes, they are being used in a comp or used in all different phases. When it comes to AFK Arena, we're looking at Curse Realm, Nightmare Corridor, Treasure Scramble, Campaign Formations, Temple Rift, a lot of different places that they are being used. Starting, of course, Liberta still holding the absolute #1 slot. Priority to build out of the Celestials and the Hypos. #1 when it comes to unlocking that Stargazer is building out Liberta, and Liberta is still doing incredibly well, which is the exact same for Lavatoon. Another hero that can be put into a lot of different formations, is incredible when it comes to buffing. And again, utility-wise, there is not a place in AFK Arena that Lavatoon is not being used. Then, of course, the Awakened version of Chimera. Really, and looking at the SSS heroes, or even the first 3 tiers, they're really the primary heroes that we see utility-wise in AFK Arena. And of course, like I was saying, the Awakened version of Chimera, still in a ton of different game modes with a lot of utility. Then, of course, we have Demia. Demia, very, very broken. Probably either the second or the third Celestial and Hypo that essentially you want to build. Because looking at a regular tier list or just kind of the top 4, you want to focus on Liberta, and then you're looking at either Demia or Lavatoon. And then, of course, you're looking at Lucilla, which is a little bit further down, but again, it still does have a lot of utility in a lot of different game modes, which is actually right here. Now, looking at the Awakened version of Athalia, again, every single game mode in AFK Arena, Athalia is being used, even used in a lot of teams where she is literally the best in slot hero and the only really fit for the team, meaning that it is the best in slot again for a lot of different game modes. We have Jerome, which surprising, when Jerome came out, didn't really use him very much, but overall being able to buff up essentially all of these heroes up to the SSS class is kind of crazy when it comes to this hero, making him a big priority, especially when it comes to the regular faction heroes. Then, of course, we have Lucilla. Like I said before, there's a lot of combinations where Lucilla is being used with Liberta, but there's also a lot of combinations where Lucilla is being used without Liberta, and again, still doing incredibly well. Then we look at Ivan, again, a super high priority within AFK Arena. There are so many formations where Ivan will buff up anyone that you put him in there. We've seen him with Chimera, we've seen him with Liberta, we've seen him with the Awakened version of Athalia. It's kind of crazy the utility this hero does possess. Then we get into Palmer. Palmer, of course, one of the big priority buffing heroes, very similar to Jerome and another light bearer, but ultimately when it comes to buffing and when it comes to getting the crit damage and the crit amplification, or the crit rate and the crit damage amplification, Palmer is one of the heroes that only do that unique to him, which makes him an absolute priority. Now we're still seeing Rem still having a lot of utility. Don't know how much longer, but overall, when you put like a Rem and Ulna in a combination, it just absolutely is devastating, especially if you're running Amelia in there. Amelia crowd controls them. Rem just ults like crazy, meaning that you are crushing entire teams. Then, of course, we have Tiny Tank. So the only Mauler that made a presence, really short of the Awakened Maulers. Naruko does incredibly well because of the buffing, but also the damage, also pretty much the shielding. Everything that a tank needs to do is what Naruko does. Of course, this is with the assist of Nadia, which works incredibly well within AFK Arena. Then we do have Amelia, again, instant crowd control with energy regeneration, makes the hero very, very broken. And then we do have the Awakened version of Laika. Again, when you think of heroes, a lot of utility, a lot of different formations, seeing a lot of different gameplay. Some of them she's being played more as a support hero. Some of the formations she's being as a absolute primary damage dealer in formations, which again really makes her a driving force. And still, when you look at the Awakened heroes in that SSS tier, we have Chimera, we have the Awakened version of Athalia, and we do have Laika in here, again, making a really big difference. When we start getting into the SS tier, again, this is another very high priority tier. Maybe not utility in every single game mode, but you're talking probably 80% of the game modes we are still seeing a ton of utility, starting with the Awakened version of Baden. Again, when you look at game modes, Nightmare Corridor, Cursed Realm being used there, Treasure Scramble, unfortunately not being used there, which again, we see them in some formations, but not as many as we once did. And as we continue to get new heroes within AFK Arena, I feel like the utility of the hero is going to change. Now, of course, we finally got the ability to build out Eugene. We're seeing him stuck in a bunch of different formations, sometimes doing a lot of damage within formations, other time just doing sub damage more as a support hero with the SP effect that he does possess. Now, the Awakened version of Belinda, starting to see her slide down a little. She used to be predominantly and really locked into that SSS tier. At this point, we're not seeing her in all of the formations again. Still quite a considerable amount of them, but we're not seeing them in or her in all formations. Now, looking at Aethys, Aethys is a tank. Now, when you try a really tried and true tank, Aethys does incredible, not only to boost the regular damage that the normal attacks are doing, but also survivability is there, crowd control is there, damage amplification, so bringing something to the group is there, making him with an incredible amount of utility. Then we look at Gavis. Gavis is kind of what we see, kind of like with Hildwyn, very defensive in nature, does a decent amount of damage, but not going to go over the top for damage. But again, as a kind of a support, kind of a crossover, does incredibly well with the damage mitigation, the survivability aspect, especially when you get into the higher damage levels and when you get into the Treasure Scramble, it is doing incredibly well. Now, the Awakened version of Lucius, not really much in the tanking aspect, but Awakened version of Lucius does a lot of damage, which is the reason why a lot of players do run Lucius. Again, there are a lot of formations where he is still best in slot, which is what we do see him. Now, Tricia, I feel like, is one that is slowly losing the footing. Again, we see her kind of not as a primary damage dealer, but as a sub DPS. And then, of course, looking at all these heroes, any one of these that you put into a tower formation are going to perform incredibly well. Now, the Awakened version of Solus, again, another kind of a support hero. We know the Awakened version of Solus and Sophia being still used in a couple different game modes for the survivability aspect of both of them, the shielding aspect, and really even looking in the Dragonforge, the Awakened version of Sophia is pretty broken overall, which is very cool to see. But again, the hero's having a lot of utility. Now, Vathiel, again, as a buffer, as a tank, does die a little bit quick, but if you can get him to last a little bit, getting the buffs, he does a considerable amount of damage in formation. Same with Tamris. Tamris, of course, little bit of crowd control in there, but a lot of buffer with the enthusiasm, which is the reason why we're still seeing the hero here. The ability to essentially put Tamris in there with Aethys and some of the other heroes in combination just work incredibly well with the synergy that they create, making them really, really effective. Then we have Scarlet. Of course, when it comes to Scarlet, Scarlet is still one of the top burst damage dealers that we see within AFK Arena, making her an absolute primary hero to have within the Nightmare Corridor. And of course, looking at other game modes, if you don't have all of these Awakened heroes built up, if you don't have copies, if you don't have all the heroes built, Scarlet is still a very strong damage dealer in a lot of AFK Arena. Then we have Silas in here. Again, immunity support buffer can be placed as a sub for a lot of the heroes if you don't have them built. Awakened version of Thane, we're actually seeing a little bit of a resurgence of him being actually used in a couple different areas. And again, as we continue to get new heroes to AFK Arena, some of the old ones kind of get either used a little bit less or actually used a little bit more, depending on the formations that we see. And then, of course, we have Rosaline in here, which can be literally put in and followed. Liberta can follow, Athalia can follow, Shamira can follow. So many heroes in here just amplifying the ultimate abilities that they do possess. Moving down the tier list and looking at the S, we still have Alna in here again. When it comes to heroes, when it comes to survivability, not many warriors will do what Alna does, which essentially keeps the other hero alive. Looking at Rem, looking at a lot of different targets, the immunity factor that she does for other targets as well as herself is very, very important. Now, looking at Matria, again, there are some team comps that are using Matria. There's a few, and we actually thought with Kelthin that we'd see a little bit of a resurgence of her because of the damage that Kelthin was putting out, but overall not seeing a lot of damage in there. Then we get into Orin, again, Cursed Realm, absolutely vital if you don't have all the heroes built out. A very good sub for the Awakened version of Thane and a couple other game modes. Now, the twins, again, starting to kind of fall down the tier list. Used to be that SSS factor for a long time. As we continue to get more support heroes, seems like we're going to be using this hero less. Then we get into our Draconis hero. That is right. Hildwyn is the primary one to build in here. Now, overall, I've switched the YouTube account to actually build out Hildwyn with the copies that they're giving us just through the regular 5th anniversary event that we have, the Draconis Heroes. Everything that we're doing, Hildwyn's going to be very easy to build out with all of the copies, meaning it's going to be very effective to build him out. Well, Gwen is going to be very, very costly is kind of what we're seeing in here. Then we have Lady Simona, of course, with the Awakened version of Shamira, just kind of broken in formations, even running Ivan in here. The combination or the trio of the heroes do incredibly well in a lot of different game modes. Now, Albedo still holding on strong. That is because of the Rem Amelia combination. Putting her kind of as the third one does do incredibly well. Mortis as a support as a buffer. Joan, the exact same as a support as a buffer. Then we have Polina in here. Now, big thing to note, Polina is a ranger. Polina has the ability to go into a lot of different formations. Utility in this hero can actually go in and out of formations, very similar to what we seen kind of Crescio when he was built, but overall the hero doing incredibly well in a lot of different game modes. Even looking at the Dragon Forge, doing very, very well utility-wise, does have to be built up because, of course, as a damage-dealing hero, the higher you build them, the better they're going to perform, which rings true for a lot of heroes. Now, Mulan still making the top tiers within the tier list. Again, when it comes to the shop, getting copies of Mulan and really building her out will make a big difference in the PvP aspect as well as a couple other formations. Then we have Kelthin in here. Again, Kelthin kind of being used in a niche formation. We've seen him kind of here and there. Don't know if he's really solidified the formations yet, but of course, damage dealer has to be built out a considerable amount. Then we have Kanisa and Rook, Energy Disintegration, which works incredibly well with the Awakened version of Shamira. Again, still seeing some Matria play in there with Kelthin and Kanisa and Rook. Still do and still is working pretty well. The Awakened version of Brutus, again, I don't know how much longer he's going to hold on to this. We're starting to see him drop down a little bit. And overall utility, again, kind of fading out a little bit. But if you're looking at sub-heroes, if you're looking at support heroes, really the warrior, the crowd control aspect that he brings can be used in a lot of different places. Same with his kind of counterpart or his teacher. Anasta, it does work, again, pretty well within formations. The defensive aspect with the Brawler's protection. Then we have Olgath in here. Again, Olgath, damage dealer, does require a very big build out, kind of like Kelthin. Then we get Gwen in here. Gwen, a lot of damage, a lot of crowd control. Only problem that is really holding Gwen back, and a lot of players can kind of attest to this, is the squishiness. Gwen has zero survivability, meaning that when you start getting into level deficiencies, if Gwen takes a hit, it's game over. She's dead. Literally, I've used her in some of the higher level deficiencies, really just to try her out, even trying out the test version of her, even being fully built in the entirety. One hit is usually all that it takes in its entirety. I was hoping we could get her ultimate ability, get the crowd control up, and really do some damage with the hero, but unfortunately, the ability to keep her alive is very, very lacking within formations. I didn't think she would be as squishy as she really is. Then, of course, we have Odin in here working again with Shamira and working with Lady Simona and a couple other ones, still doing pretty good damage in some formations. Halis as a buffer, Rowan as a crowd control energy regeneration buffer. Same with Merlin and Rain, of course, with the damage amplification that we have. And again, when you look big picture AFK Arena, the S, the SS, and the triple S are the heroes that are fitting in a majority of formations. Again, if you have them all built, you're not going to use them all. If you have, some of them built or some of them not quite as built as you need to, there are a lot of substitutes that fall into game modes, really breaking out the utility tier list. Now, looking at the A list, this, as you can see, is a lot of what we're seeing. Either one, a very niche formations, or two, absolutely important when it comes to the towers, is kind of where we're seeing this. Now, of course, the Awakened version of Leica in the Wilder Tower does well. Hodgkin as a buffer. Lorzen with the linking ability to amplify damage, which honestly, I've seen Lorzen kind of drop out of a lot of formations. Same with Zorath, not really seeing a ton of different places, kind of a niche. Same with Yennefer, kind of a niche. Scrag, the Invade team, we were hoping it would come back with a few other heroes, but unfortunately, at this point, we haven't seen a lot of utility with Scrag. Even the original version of Aziz, not seeing a lot of play. Now, Leonardo, still seeing play, usually within campaign formations, but again, most other formations, he's already been dropped out. Queen and Grez, unfortunately, again, not seeing a lot. Now, we are seeing some of Elise or Adrian and Elise, so the dancers, Big thing with them only falling in the A tier is you do have to have the plus 40 signature item on them to really do what they need to. Without the plus 40 signature item, we're finding the effectiveness of the hero literally drops to probably about 30 to 40%. Not seeing a ton of utility in there. Estrilda, again, we've started to see her back in the curse realm, which is kind of crazy. Seeing the hero kind of making a little bit of a resurgence. Then, of course, we have Nevi in here. We have Edwin in here as a buffer. Now we have Cassius. Cassius, tanking-wise, is doing incredibly well. But again, looking at a lot of the utility, still very, very early for the Draconis heroes. But again, not seeing a ton of utility in formations outside of the Dragon Forge, which is kind of sad to see. Now, Mishka still not being used. Damon is the carry early game, but starting to look further where maybe a one-off like a stall team with Taylene. We're seeing Robin Hood in the Treasure Scramble and only the Treasure Scramble. Valkyrie, the exact same, just the Treasure Scramble utility. Even looking here, I believe Braum is in the Burning Brute, and that's the only place we've seen them. The rest of these, again, really falling down formations. Thorn, of course, with the Thorn Cheese. But I wanted to get to the B tier because this is actually where Nyla was actually placed in the B tier for this one. Overall, we're seeing utility within the Curse Realm, but only one formation in the Curse Realm. And overall, surprising enough, we're not seeing a lot of these heroes used within the Treasure Scramble. I thought PvP would be a really big thing, which again, it is very early for these heroes to see exactly where they're kind of built out. But in here, we do have the original version of Baden, still being used as a cheese within some comps within the Cursed Realm, not really being used anywhere else, but even looking just kind of running through this, most of the heroes at this point have dropped out of the tier list almost in their entirety, sort of being used very similar to the A list, where we do see them within tower formations, even looking at hero swaps. So if you have heroes that are built like down in the C tier, these are all the towers if you're using them. Getting to multiple stages, getting to 2 teams, getting to 3 teams. A lot of these heroes are going to be used just for those specific formations, just kind of based on the build and where they're at. Again, looking at my hero, looking at Khazard, really just used as crowd control within campaign formations. Flora, not really used anywhere. The stall team was good for a couple minutes, and it seems like at this point we're not seeing them. Then, of course, getting a little bit further into the C tier and the D tier, more heroes are starting to join this D tier, of course, because again, utility-wise, they're even dropped out of the towers at this point. But looking again kind of at the C tier, if you have heroes in here that are decently built, it's kind of at the point to swap them, but also remember that some of them are going to be used for tower formations, but outside of the towers, we're not seeing a lot of utility. So overall, guys, the Draconis heroes, very, again, early with the placement of where those heroes are falling. So essentially, we have 3 in the S tier, 1 in the A, 1 in the B. We're going to have to see. I feel like Nyla is really, really going to move up, and I feel like Hildwyn is probably going to move up quite a bit, as well as Pulina. We're going to have to see where Gwen does come in because of the utility and really the survivability that we see within AFK Arena. Sorry, guys. So that is going to do it for our May tier list. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.